Have you ever noticed yourself thinking, I did something nice for them yesterday, so they should do something for me today? Have you ever held back affection because you were waiting to see if they'd give it first? Have you ever found yourself mentally listing everything you've done for them lately, just in case you need proof during the next argument? If so, something has shifted in your relationship, something most couples don't notice until it's already destroyed what they had. Your love has become a transaction, and you might not even realise you're keeping score. If this is happening to you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what it's like when you stop texting first because you've been the one initiating for 3 days straight. When you wait to see if they'll notice, if they'll reach out, if they'll finally match your effort. You know what it's like when they ask for something, a back rub, help with something, your time, and your first thought isn't yes, it's what have they done for me lately? You know what it's like when you're doing dishes and you're silently fuming because you did them yesterday too, and the day before, and they haven't even noticed that you're always the one doing them. You know what it's like to hold back I love you because they said it last, to refuse to apologise first because you apologised last time, to keep a running tally in your head of who's trying harder. And the worst part, you hate that you're doing this. You hate that love has become this calculated, but you can't seem to stop, because somewhere along the way, giving freely started to feel like giving too much, and you got tired of feeling like you were the only one trying. Here's what I want you to understand. This didn't happen because you're a bad person. It happened because you got hurt, and keeping score felt like the only way to protect yourself from being hurt again. But that protection is destroying your relationship, and if you don't understand why it's happening and how to stop it, you're going to lose something you might not be ready to lose. Stay here, because what you're about to learn could save your relationship, or it could help you finally see why it's already over. Here's how it starts, and it's always small, so small you don't even notice it's happening. You planned a date night, you made the reservation, you got dressed up, you were excited, and halfway through dinner, they're on their phone. Not the whole time, just enough to make you feel like this doesn't matter to them as much as it matters to you. You don't say anything, but you notice, you remember. A few days later, they need something. Help moving furniture, a ride to the airport, your emotional support through something stressful. And instead of just helping, you hesitate. You think about that dinner, about how they were on their phone, about how you put in all that effort and they couldn't even be fully present, so you help. But not wholeheartedly, not the way you would have before. You help, but you're a little distant, a little cold, a little less available than you could be. They notice, but they don't understand why, so they pull back a little too. And just like that, the cycle begins. You're not keeping score consciously. Not yet. You're just noticing patterns, protecting yourself, making sure you're not giving more than you're getting. But those small protections add up. And before you know it, you're running a full emotional audit of your relationship. Here's what most people don't realize about the beginning of transactional love. It feels justified. It feels fair. It feels like you're finally standing up for yourself because you're tired. Tired of always being the one who plans things. Tired of always being the one who apologizes. Tired of always being the one who tries. So you stop trying as hard and you tell yourself this is healthy. This is setting boundaries. This is making sure the relationship is balanced. But it's not balance you're creating. It's a standoff where both people are waiting for the other to prove they care before they're willing to care back. And that's not how love works. That's how transactions work. Here's what keeping score actually looks like in everyday moments. And if you recognize yourself in these, you're already deep in transactional love. It's Sunday morning. You wake up and think about making breakfast for both of you. But then you remember you made breakfast last Sunday and the Sunday before that. So you wait. You see if they'll get up and make it this time. If they don't, they're still sleeping or scrolling on their phone. So you make your own breakfast, just yours. And when they finally get up and look confused about why you didn't make enough for two, you say, I didn't know if you wanted any. But that's not the truth. The truth is you were testing them, waiting to see if they'd step up. And when they didn't, you felt justified in not trying. Or it's Tuesday night, you've had a terrible day, Everything went wrong. You're exhausted and overwhelmed, and you just need them to hold you, but you don't ask. Because last week when they had a bad day, you dropped everything to be there for them. And this week when you mentioned you were stressed, they said that sucks and went back to watching TV. So you don't ask for what you need. You just go to bed, alone, quietly resentful, adding this to the list of times they weren't there when you needed them. Or it's Friday afternoon, they text asking what you want for dinner, and your first thought isn't about food, it's about the fact that you've planned dinner for the last 4 nights. So you text back, I don't know, what do you want? Not because you don't have an opinion, but because you're tired of being the one who figures everything out, and you want to see if they'll actually take initiative for once. Or it's Wednesday evening, you're both home, you're sitting on opposite ends of the couch. You want to cuddle, you want physical closeness, but you were the one who initiated last time, and the time before that. So you wait. You hope they'll reach for you, that they'll be the one who wants closeness this time, but they don't. And the distance between you on that couch feels like miles. These moments seem small, petty even. You know you're being petty, but you can't stop, because each of these moments represents something bigger. A pattern of you giving and them taking, of you trying and them coasting, of you carrying the relationship while they just show up. At least that's what it feels like to you. But here's what you don't see. They're doing the exact same thing. While you're upset that you always plan dinner, they're upset that they always have to initiate sex. While you're resentful about making breakfast, they're resentful that they always have to start the difficult conversations. You both think you're the one giving more. You both feel unappreciated. You both are keeping score. And you both are convinced the other person is winning. This is the cruelest part of transactional love. You're both playing a game where everyone loses. Here's what happens to communication when love becomes transactional. It dies, slowly, painfully, until you're barely talking about anything that matters, because real communication requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust, and trust requires believing that when you open up, you won't be punished for it. But when you're keeping score, everything becomes ammunition. You can't tell them you're feeling disconnected because they'll say, well, maybe if you weren't so distant. You can't say you need more affection because they'll counter with, I give you affection and you barely respond. So you stop talking, you stop sharing, you stop being honest about what you're feeling. Instead, you communicate through tests, through withdrawal, through passive-aggressive comments that allow you to express resentment without being vulnerable enough to actually say what's wrong. You say fine when you're not fine. You say nothing's wrong when everything is wrong. You say I'm just tired when what you really mean is, I'm tired of feeling like I'm the only one who cares. And they do the same thing. Both of you speaking in code. Both of you hoping the other will magically understand what you need without having to risk asking for it. Because asking for something directly feels dangerous when you're keeping score. What if they say no? What if you're vulnerable and they use it against you? So you both stay silent, both testing, both waiting for the other to prove they care without having to risk caring first. And the distance grows, not because you don't love each other, but because you're both too afraid to show that you do. Here's what happens when you've been keeping score for months, maybe years. It becomes automatic. You stop seeing your partner as your partner. You start seeing them as someone you need to protect yourself from. Every interaction gets filtered through the question, what will this cost me? They want to talk about something serious. You think, I don't have the energy for this right now. I've been emotionally available all week. It's their turn to deal with their own problems. They want to be intimate. You think, we had sex 3 days ago, and that was my idea. If they want it now, they need to actually put in effort. They made a mistake and need to apologise. You think, good. Let them be the one saying sorry for once. Let them be the one who's vulnerable. Every single interaction becomes a negotiation, a transaction, a calculation of whether you're getting as much as you're giving. And the relationship that once felt easy now feels like work, exhausting work that neither of you signed up for. You start dreading time together because it's just another opportunity for disappointment, another chance for them to prove they don't care as much as you do. Even good moments get contaminated by the scorekeeper in your head. They do something sweet, and instead of just enjoying it, you think, finally. About time. Where was this energy last week? You can't just receive love anymore. You have to evaluate it, measure it, decide if it's enough to balance out what they didn't do. And that's exhausting. For both of you. Here's the part where most people get stuck. Because once you start keeping score, you can't just stop. It feels too risky. If you stop keeping track, how will you know if things are fair? How will you know if you're being taken advantage of? How will you protect yourself from being the person who loves more and gets hurt more? So you keep doing it. Keep counting. Keep measuring. Keep calculating. And your partner does the same, because they feel just as unsafe as you do. Both of you are so busy protecting yourselves that neither of you is actually loving the other anymore. You're both just managing, maintaining, making sure you don't give more than you get. And that's not a relationship, that's a stalemate. Here's what transactional love does to intimacy. It destroys it completely, because intimacy requires spontaneity. It requires giving without thinking. It requires responding to your partner's needs without calculating whether they've earned your response. But when you're keeping score, nothing is spontaneous. You can't kiss them just because you want to. You have to think about whether they kissed you last. You can't tell them you love them just because you feel it. You have to check if they've said it recently. Sex becomes especially transactional. It stops being about mutual desire and starts being about who's owed what. You keep track of who initiated last, who put in more effort, who seemed more into it. And instead of sex being intimate connection, it becomes another item on the ledger. And this kills desire, because desire doesn't respond to obligation, it responds to genuine wanting, to feeling wanted, to the safety of knowing your pleasure matters for its own sake. When sex becomes transactional, it stops being intimate, it becomes another chore. Another thing you have to make sure is fair. Here's the question that reveals everything. When was the last time you did something kind for your partner without thinking about whether they deserved it? When was the last time you initiated affection without checking whether it was your turn? When was the last time you gave freely? If you can't remember, your relationship has become a transaction, and transactions don't create love. They kill it. Because here's what keeping score actually does. It makes generosity feel stupid. It makes vulnerability feel dangerous. It makes love feel like a risk you can't afford to take. So you stop being generous, you stop being vulnerable, you stop loving openly, and so do they. And what you're left with is two people living together, sharing space, going through the motions, while both of you are completely alone. Here's what this feels like from the inside, and maybe this will help you recognize just how deep you are. You're lying in bed next to them, they're asleep, or pretending to be, and you feel completely alone. More alone than you've ever felt, because loneliness in a relationship is different than loneliness when you're single. When you're lying next to someone who's supposed to love you and you still feel utterly alone, that's a specific kind of pain. You want to reach for them, you want to tell them how you're feeling, you want to ask them if they even still love you, but you don't, because you've learned that vulnerability gets punished, that opening up just gives them ammunition, that showing you care first means you lose. So you lie there, alone, next to the person you love, both of you isolated in the same bed. Or maybe it's a Saturday, you're both home in different rooms doing different things, and you realise you haven't had a real conversation in weeks. You've talked about logistics, about groceries, about schedules, but you haven't actually talked about feelings, about what's happening between you, about whether you're both okay. And you want to walk into that room and say, we need to talk about us. But you don't. Because you're waiting for them to notice first, waiting for them to care enough to bring it up. So you both stay in your separate rooms, both aware something is wrong, both waiting for the other to care enough to address it. This is what transactional love feels like drowning slowly while the person who could save you is also drowning, also waiting for you to save them first. Here's the truth about why this happens, and it's going to hurt, but you need to hear it. You started keeping score because you felt hurt, unseen, unappreciated, like you were giving your whole heart and getting back a fraction. And maybe you were. Maybe they really weren't matching your effort. Maybe the imbalance was real. But keeping score didn't fix the imbalance. It just made you both start giving less. Now instead of one person giving 80% and the other giving 50%, you're both giving 30%, and you're both calling that fair. But it's not fair. It's just both of you withholding, both of you protecting, both of you slowly starving the relationship while blaming the other person for the hunger. Because what you need isn't fairness, it's love. Real, freely given, no strings attached love. And you can't calculate your way to that, you can't negotiate your way to that, you can't protect your way to that, you can only risk your way to it by giving first, by being vulnerable first, by loving without guarantees. Here's what has to happen if you want to save this. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to be hard. Someone has to stop keeping score. Someone has to give freely again. Someone has to be vulnerable first. And that someone might need to be you. Not because it's fair, not because you should have to, but because if both of you keep waiting for the other person to go first, you'll both wait forever. So here's what that looks like. For the next week, give without keeping track. Text them first, even though you texted first yesterday. Make dinner, even though it's not your turn. Say I love you, even though they said it last. Plan a date, even though you planned the last one. Ask about their date, even though they forgot to ask about yours. And here's the hard part. Do it without expecting anything back. Do it without checking to see if they notice. Do it without keeping score of your own generosity. Just give. Because you love them. Not because they have earned it. This isn't about being a doormat. This is about breaking the pattern. About showing love in a way that feels safe enough for them to show love back. And watch what happens. Watch if your generosity creates space for theirs. Watch if 1 week of freely given love reminds them what you used to have. Sometimes it works. Sometimes one person stops keeping score and the other person feels safe enough to do the same. Sometimes they've been waiting for this. Waiting for you to go first. Waiting for proof that you still love them underneath all the protection. And when both people stop keeping score, something beautiful happens. You remember why you fell in love. You remember what it felt like to give without calculating. But sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you give freely and they just take. Sometimes your vulnerability is met with more distance. And if that happens, you'll know. You'll know that they're not keeping score because they're afraid. They're keeping score because they've already decided this isn't worth fighting for. But either way, you'll know. And knowing is better than this. Better than keeping score forever. Better than slowly dying while pretending you're both still trying. So make the choice. Stop counting. Stop calculating. Stop keeping score. For 1 week, love like you used to. Give like you did in the beginning. Be vulnerable like you were when you first fell for them. And find out what's underneath all the protection. Maybe you'll find love again. Real, messy, generous love. The kind that doesn't keep track because it doesn't need to. Or maybe you'll find that the love already left, and all that's left is two people going through motions, keeping score, waiting for the other to care first. Either way, you deserve more than this. More than a relationship that feels like a negotiation. More than love that requires receipts. You deserve to give freely, to be loved freely, to stop wondering if you're being taken advantage of every time you show affection. You deserve a relationship where you can make breakfast without wondering if it's your turn. Where you can say I love you without checking who said it last. Where you can reach for them without calculating if you've earned their touch. So stop keeping score. Put down the calculator, close the ledger, and see what's left when you do. Maybe you'll find that the love is still there, waiting underneath all the fear. Or maybe you'll finally admit that it's time to let go. Either way, you'll stop living in this painful in-between where you're together but completely alone.